I've heard of this concept of grounding and people buying grounding sheets, grounding mats, and I've heard a lot of great things about what it can do for you. And perhaps you can explain what it does for you, why it's so beneficial, and why it's a part of integrity wellness.
Absolutely. When we consider the word grounding, it means connected to the ground or the earth. There's another term called earthing. And again, same thing. It means connecting to the earth that we are from, that we are part of. So when we consider the history of human beings, up until probably 100 years ago, not even 100 years ago, 1950s, 1940s, something like that, when shoes, the rubber sole was invented and then manufactured and then mass marketed and put out there, we were always at least somewhat connected to the earth. And the reason that it's important that we're connected to the earth is because the earth is the place of discharge and charge. So, what do those two terms mean? Our bodies always carry and have to have a negative charge for every single cell in your body to be able to be sovereign and stand on its own for full communication with all the other cells. So imagine your body is, 100 trillion cells. That's a lot. And each and every one of them has to have a negative charge. And we get that from the earth. Well, we're no longer connected to the earth. And we also, since we are an electrical system, we have learned very quickly through creating electrical devices that they need a ground. And why do they need a ground? Because they have to be able to discharge into the ground so that they don't catch on fire. And so that same principle applies to our bodies. Our bodies are an electrical system, and it requires us to be able to discharge into the ground. And I call it electro-smog, but you can call it whatever you want. It's really the energy that's been used and built up that needs to be transmuted before it can be used again. So it goes into the earth and then recycled and regenerated back into charge and energy through the earth. And then as you charge yourself and discharge yourself, what happens in our body? Why would that be beneficial? Not just for putting out fires, but when you're able to discharge, you're able to create space in your body, in your blood vessels, in the interstitium, in your fascia, in every part of you, in all your joints, right? All of the fluid that's in your body is then able to flow better. When you can have space and flow, then your body can actually function. So the reason that we get so many ailments and so many distortions and pain and suffering is partially, in a good part, because we've been so disconnected from the natural world and the earth specifically. So when you allow yourself to charge and recharge, or discharge, you're actually giving your body the nutrients that it needs in order to survive and communicate, live, and transfer your electromagnetic field outwards, right? That is really what life is. So earthing or grounding, we can't do really for 6 months out of the year in northern climates. We're in Canada. And so we have different products: grounding mats, grounding sheets, grounding pads, grounding patches, grounding pillowcases, you name it. And a lot of people question the quality of them, whether they work or not. They don't understand exactly how they work. So maybe, if you don't mind, I'd like to just explain how that works in relation to just explaining what grounding is. Is that okay? So now understanding that grounding and connection to the earth creates an improvement in your body's ability for better health, lower blood pressure, because of think about the space and the flow, right? Less pain, less inflammation. If we can't have access really to grounding 6 months out of the year here in Canada, in northern climates and other places, then what else can we do? We can bring that into our homes or into our workspaces or into our cars in various ways. Technology has advanced and innovated ways that we can actually be connected through different materials that are connected to the ground source of our outlets in our homes. And there's ways to measure whether they work or not. You can use little electrometers that can measure the voltage, or you can also tune in to your body. You know your body the best, right? So if you use one, you will absolutely be able to sense that it's doing something. You can feel an improvement in flow, which is often tingles or sometimes heat for people. And you can, with, Fitbits or smartwatches, you can actually measure the changes in your biometrics. And it's truly evident, the improvements that are happening for people. And I get reports all the time from people that are sleeping with a grounding sheet or driving because they commute or drive long distances, so they have one in their car. Very significant improvements. And then that translates over time into really noticeable improvements in how we're feeling and living in our well-being. So grounding sheets and grounding mats are kind of the two most popular, I would say. And we do offer those at Integrity Wellness. And we've done a ton of research to test the different products to see which ones are actually useful and which ones are not useful. For us, the quality of anything is really, really important. And so we've landed on a company that we know works really well and does what it says it does. And we've also had objective evidence to prove that as well. So when you buy something, you want to know that it's going to be working for you. And so when people, our members, have gotten a grounding mat from us or a sheet or whatever product, it's usually somewhere between a couple of days and 2 to 3 weeks. And they're kind of sharing their stories with us of all of the different things that improve. And some of the main things that improve are sleep, pain, energy, feeling more rested, and they've slept better. So they actually feel the effects of sleeping better as well in their day-to-day life. And we've had people come with reduced blood pressure, and they've actually reduced their blood pressure pills as a result. Those are the pretty main ones. Pain is huge, though. There's been a lot of people that suffer from chronic pain, and they feel like they have no options, right? And when we do something that's very simple but fundamental, and we do it consistently, right? So we sleep with a grounding sheet on our bed, where between 5 to 8 hours a night, depending on how much sleep you get, you're charging and discharging. It actually then translates into your tissues over time, and it will allow more space. It will allow some of the chronic inflammation to dispel and disperse itself and be reabsorbed and taken up and used in other ways instead of being, junking up the joints and the fascia and the tissues and the muscles and the ligaments. And so these are life-changing, simple acts that we can all do in our day-to-day life to improve our health and our well-being.
Awesome. Yeah, it's amazing how a little investment into something that you literally just have to sleep on or just have near your computer or near your office space or something you can touch will connect you to the earth. And it's important to clarify that when you're grounded, you're not using electricity. You're just plugged into the ground, right?
Yes,
Or you're plugged into something that's connected to something beneath the earth. And therefore, that's conducting a grounding pulse into your body, right?
precisely. So every outlet that we have now has a little circle spot in that outlet. It's the third bottom spot, and that is the grounding location. So any plug that's plugged in that has one of that bottom third prong that's plugged in is grounded then. And then it has a significantly reduced risk of catching fire, right? Nothing about plugging just your grounding mat into that sole bottom outlet part is electrical in nature. It's not man-made electricity. It is quite precisely what is connected from that outlet to the ground, and the ground is giving you, the earth is giving you the charge and the discharge.
There's a ton of research on how to check if your grounding mat is working and it is actually truly grounded. But essentially, you would plug in a multimeter into that hole and then into the snap that would connect to the grounding mat, or you can connect it to that flat piece where the snap goes on. And it should be between 0 or 0.5, preferably 0, because that would be neutral. That would mean neutral, which is neutral energy is grounded energy.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask, at Integrity Wellness, you have grounding mats on pretty much all the modalities
Mm-hmm.
outside of a select few. Even in the scalars, which we'll talk about eventually,
Mm-hmm.
you ground people with a patch.
Mm-hmm.
Why is being grounded added, stacked to each of the modalities that much more effective?
That's a really great question. So when we are giving our bodies nourishment, so I call light and sound and pulsed electromagnetic field therapy and scalar and all of our modalities here, I call them nourishment. And so when you hear me say nourishment, that's what I'm referring to. So when we provide our physical body with the nourishment that it needs, it's going to respond, and it's going to respond fairly quickly. And what that means is your body is going to want to get rid of or move the electromagnetic, the bonds, the electromagnetic bonds or the chemical bonds or any of the energy that's in your body right now that's already been used up, that really does need to be discharged and transmuted so that it can be recycled into fully strong electromagnetic energy again. That is the reason why, is because as soon as you start nourishing your body with even better thoughts, a better connection or relationship to yourself, or, better information that's more aligned with who you are and where you want to be. All of those things are going to change your chemistry and your physiology inside. And as we do that, and we create space and we improve the flow between all of your cells, there's a lot of buildup. There's a lot of breakdown and metabolic waste and cellular debris that really needs some place to go and move. So when we ground, we're moving that kind of junk. I call it electro-smog. But really it's all of that, or soot. That's the other name I sometimes call it for members to understand. When you clean out a fireplace from the soot, you can have a much better, more longer lasting fire, right? The quality of it's better, the lifetime of it's better. All of its qualities are improved. It's the same as your body. So when we make space and we can get your body to start flowing and moving the junk that's been stored up in between them, because it's holding on to these bonds and this energy because it doesn't have anything else yet. The second your body is able to do that, it can sing, it can harmonize again, it can communicate better. It's going to send the signals, the proper signals, to the proper places, and magic happens. Your body heals itself. And so it's always going to do the best that it can with what it has. It will hold on to whatever it needs in whatever condition it's there, doing the best it can. But if you're constantly giving it new building blocks, like new energetic and electromagnetic pulse and new water and new light, and these are nourishment, it can rebuild and regenerate to the point that it then holds those changes, and you become this newer version of yourself through these changes. So when we ground, while you do everything, we're allowing your body the ability to heal and communicate properly because of the principles of what grounding does in your body at the same time. There's only one modality that we cannot use grounding with. And so there are times where we can't use it, and maybe we should kind of address that. When we create a plasma field, so we have an amazing technology called Therify, and we're one of the only ones, clinics in Canada, there's maybe 5 total that have one. We're the only ones in Ontario that I'm aware of. So plasma vortex technology creates a plasma field, like a cold ion wind field. And because of the flow of ions, the charge that's in that field, if we have you grounded, then you're just getting rid of the charge that we're providing within that field. So that's about the only time that we don't ground, but we do ground before and after, because then that gives you the optimal uptake and nourishment from that modality.
For sure. Yeah. We will definitely talk about the Therify sometime soon, because that's an amazing device and with unbelievable, I guess, potential. Nevertheless, one thing I wanted to ask about, there is a slight difference between PEMF and grounding, or electromagnetism mats, or PEMI mats and grounding, that we can slightly touch upon. I think that would be important, but also we won't go too into details about the PEMF, because we'll save that magnetism itself for another time. But grounding has some similar properties. And one thing that you mentioned is when we ground, we're actually discharging into the earth. Not only are we receiving the negative charge, but we're discharging into the earth. And before we talk about the discrepancies, perhaps between the PEMF and the grounding, I want to ask, why are we, especially since the 50s, you mentioned the rubber shoes, and of course, I'm sure it's a lifestyle change is probably where I'm getting at, but why are we so disconnected from the earth, and why do we have so much buildup of positive energy? And How is this affecting us in multiple ways? Like, why does this make grounding even more important than
Mm-hmm.
we realize?
So since about, I think it was about the 50s, when shoes changed from leather bottoms to rubber bottoms, we lost the ability to send and receive signal. That's really what it is. And so that charge then gets built up in our system. And we have an enclosed, pressurized hydroelectric system. So if we don't have any for that energy that's been used and already broken down and needs to be able to discharge, if we don't have anywhere for that to go, it's going to stay in your system and wreak havoc. It's going to create all sorts of distortion. And by distortion, I mean disorder, dysregulation, disharmony. There'll be all sorts of chemical and electrical bonds, energy that has nowhere to go. And then you can't get new energy in. And so when it creates all sorts of distortion, your body then has disease. It's a very simple process. We have seen quite literally since the invention and the advent of rubber-soled shoes, a serious increase in metabolic issues and high blood pressure and cardiovascular issues and memory and brain issues and neurovascular, on and on we could go. And a big part of that, not all of it, because everything is connected, but a big part of that is because we have removed our connection to the one free, the one natural, the main source of our charge and discharge. So we've lost touch with what and who we are. And in doing so, kind of ran off with what's pretty and flashy and fun, right? Like who doesn't have a whole shoe collection these days? But we haven't really thought about the consequences and the long-term results of what that's going to look like, right? We really do need to look downstream farther to what are the effects of these causes going to do and what's that going to look like. So since the 50s, we've had a dramatic increase in chronic health issues, chronic pain, and that has kind of been what's also spiraled the deterioration of the quality of choices that people make in their lives and their lifestyle choices, I mean. And so we all know that is when we start to make poorer choices in, say, food or activity, that always spirals to make us as humans in our psychology do even more poorer choices for our own well-being. And so what I'm really trying to get at is it's a vicious cycle. When you start giving your body comfort and convenience and flashiness and superficial over what's necessary and what's basic and what's fundamental, you're going to get the more of that, right? You're going to keep doing that because human psychology is going to keep going for the things that are easier and more comforting than what's sometimes harder and not so comfortable to do on a day-to-day basis, right? If we didn't have the invention of grounding sheets or grounding products, we would have to get that source outside in the winter, and that can be uncomfortable. We'd have to still put our bare feet on either grass, soil, anything that's natural. So rock or cold water where there's rock, right? Like we would have to still do those things. Trees, even when we touch trees or hug trees or spend time in nature where we're touching something, we are still grounding because they're directly connected to the ground. So these are not something that we have to do anymore, but people still don't understand, and they're not reconnecting with the basic fundamental necessities of what's required for living a healthy life. So when after the 50s, then this sort of movement of rubber sole shoes starts. Chronic health starts to deteriorate, and then it's just a spiral of more and more poorer lifestyle choices. And I think that really stemmed from that beginning in the 50s of that change.
Thank you for such a detailed response. And it's amazing that now with some of these products, you can be connected for 7 to 8 hours or, all throughout the night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a long period of time, right? As a third of the day, you could be connected
Yep.
by just sleeping, doing nothing. So definitely something to consider in terms of improving so many aspects of your health.
Mm-hmm.
Now, PEMF mats, pulsified electromagnetic field, which we'll probably talk about maybe next, because I guess it's a good segue from grounding.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between being grounded, which is connected to the earth, as opposed to being pulsified from an actual electric source?
Mm-hmm.
Because in medicine, MRI, is that right? MRI has an electromagnetic pulse similar to PEMF, except that's more for imaging. Whereas this one is still a pulse from electric source, except it's doing something that's comparable to grounding, but at perhaps a much more amplified effect.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you can explain?
I think so. At least I can hope to kind of provide some clarity on the difference between the two and the similarities between the two. So again, grounding, we're directly connected to the energy from the earth. Pulsed electromagnetic field mats are man-made, and they're also using the man-made electricity that has been developed and innovated for all of us to enjoy in life. And we all have it in our houses, and every outlet you have is also this man-made AC current. So I guess the difference right there is really important to outline. Grounding is DC current. It's direct current. And pulsed electromagnetic field mats, no matter what they are, right? We have a very natural one. I'll explain that. But those are AC current. They're alternating current, which means they're man-made. Very different from what comes from the earth. But it's meant to mimic the pulse of the earth. So the earth has this heartbeat, if you will, and it's a resonance called the Schumann resonance, and it's about 7.83 hertz as the frequency. So the cycles per second is 7.83. And that means that every 7.83, that, let me explain it again. So that per second, there's 7.83 waves of energy. So a sine wave is always the up part of the curve, and then the cosine's the down part of the curve. So it's that one of those is 1 hertz. So you get 7.83 of those per 1 second. That's the pulse. That's the pulsification that your body is receiving. That's what it's meant to do. But because we're using AC current, we can also adjust and change and amplify, as you mentioned, the frequency or the hertz or the pulse to be something else that we know can be useful for the human body, but in a different way, perhaps. So we can create pulsed electromagnetic field mats that have different settings that can be calming or can be energizing or can be reduce pain or reduce inflammation. And they have different frequencies that they pulse at. Sometimes you can feel them, sometimes you cannot. Depends on how high or low the frequency is. And so pulsed electromagnetic field therapy can be used to target very specific things because we have the innovation and the technology, right, to be able to advance and build upon the basic principles of grounding. That's really where it came from. So it's not only the heartbeat of the earth that your body is getting, but it's also then getting more targeted frequencies that can alleviate specific ailments, specific concerns, and help the body to improve just based on that. The similarities are when you're on a grounding mat or a pulse electromagnetic field mat, you are discharging and charging, right? It's just the PEMF mats have the ability to amplify and go above and beyond in the way that our minds want to direct it instead of the way that nature directs things completely.
Awesome. Yeah. So PEMF, we can make more of an adjustment that's perhaps tailored to some sort of reason.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas grounding is letting nature do what nature does best. So some best practices for people, if especially if they don't have a grounding sheet or anything that's, I guess, grounded,
Mm-hmm.
once waking up in the morning or even closer to bedtime, would grounding be a good option, even going walking outside connected to soil or earth
Mm-hmm.
barefoot?
Yeah. So if somebody doesn't have access to indoor grounding products, and they aren't able to make that investment, then absolutely. And you get outside. First thing in the morning when the sun is rising is absolutely the best because you're also then getting the infrared, which we can talk about another time as well. But ultimately, you just want to touch the surface of the earth or something that's very natural, a natural material that's directly touching the earth. So for instance, I have a wooden deck on the back of my house. So I can go outside and I have a stone walkway. Cement, stone, and wood are all natural materials that you can receive the grounding energy through and discharge into. So as long as they're directly connected to the earth, and it's not like, a multi-layered deck is a little bit, if you're on the top floor, you're probably not getting too much, even though it is still grounded. It's not direct. Direct is best. And when you directly connect to the earth in that way, it's way more powerful than anything that we can actually generate and way more productive and valuable because it's live, it's living, right? And so it's life connected to life more than it is man's invention and material products that we can develop connected to life. Those are, again, good in lots and lots of circumstances in modern life because we don't always have the capabilities. But the absolute best is if you can touch the earth and whenever you can do it.
I know for sure with a grounding pillowcase, I've seen some, or I've experienced and felt some significant changes in my overall sleep, how I feel in the morning. Definitely feeling lighter and less stiff.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you have felt some similarities as well. Is there someone at Integrity Wellness that has recently purchased one of your grounding mats that or sheets that have experienced some sort of great or insight that maybe you can speak to before we wrap up?
Absolutely. So, one of our members just recently purchased a grounding sheet. So there's different options, and some of them go underneath a sheet across the whole bed. Some of them are literally sheets that cover your whole bed. The ones that we like are very flexible and washable and very good for multiple people in a bed. So it goes across the whole bed, and whenever you touch your bare skin, or if it's thin like cotton or natural materials that's on your skin that's touching it, that will also conduct, but it's best with bare skin. So we've had a number of people purchase grounding sheets or mats. That's what we sell now. And recently I got a couple of messages saying that this member had slept with the sheet on for the last 3 nights and was also wearing a smartwatch. And the smartwatch identified some amazing improvements, and you can see them objectively. Like, it's just a soar in these numbers. So what the numbers are that it checks is her body battery, which is your charge, right? It's how well charged your cells are, and it can read that information. And it went from in the 60s normally, and she's had this data for a very long time because she wears it every night to bed. And it jumped into the 90s. 90s. So her body, think of your phone being 60% charged versus being 90% charged after having it on all night, having slept all night, right? It's kind of like that same principle. And then her heart rate variability had dramatically increased and improved. And her quality of sleep, like restorative sleep time in, went from poor to excellent. And so that was 3 nights in a row. And she showed me the graphs, and it was just incredible. And then recently she didn't realize that it wasn't plugged in one night into the grounding outlet, and had a really terrible sleep, and woke up in the morning and wasn't feeling rested, and then looked at her biometrics and they were all back down into 60s and poor and where she was previously. And then she realized that her grounding mat wasn't plugged in. So she had slept with it, like slept on it, but it wasn't actually plugged in. And so it explains, why she was feeling the way she was again, and the changes in her biometric data. And it really, really reflects how well these products have been made and how they objectively change and alter the quality of your cellular charge and your ability to have a full restful sleep and energy and heart rate variability. And I think we should talk about the importance of heart rate variability another time as well, because these are some different metrics that people aren't probably used to hearing. And I think there's many, many other ways that we can measure wellness, well-being, health than just the conventional methods.
Fantastic. That's great. There's so many courses too that you can go, and people teach you how to ground and teach you to be mindful while walking on the earth. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems quite crazy to me, but there's a lot of truth to it, because when you're discharging, now that you spoke to it that way, when you're discharging and you're charging your cells at the same time through the natural beat of the earth,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to guide your intention much better and be more present. And I'm sure that has quite a therapeutic effect on your body and the direction that you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any last things that you would like to share about the significance about grounding? One, at least the only one I can really speak to is about inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a certain pain somewhere, or acute or chronic, if you put a grounding patch on that spot, there could be a bit of an effect. So maybe where I'm getting at is the surface area of
Mm-hmm.
where you're touching important, or is just connecting most important, or if there's anything else you have to add.
With grounding, you can utilize this modality in various ways. And so my preference and my own personal approach is now to treat the human body in both a systemic way. So that means I treat your whole body, and also a targeted area if there's an area that's bothering someone. So both at the same time and always and every time, because what's the point in focusing only on an injured area when it's the whole body that's affected? And it's harder to, improve a specific injured area if we aren't doing both, right? Just by treating the full body. Your body can do it. It'll take longer because your body has to determine where the resources that you're providing it, the nourishment, where those inputs are going to go. And that's where they're needed most first. So your body's intelligence decides where that goes, not your mind, not what you want, right? And so that's why I do both. So you can absolutely ground out a specific area. So if you injured your ankle, you injured your knee, you have a tear somewhere, you have swelling somewhere, you have pain anywhere, it's leaky charge, then we can actually set 2 grounding patches on the other opposite sides of where that issue is and connect it to source of ground. And then it will allow that to discharge and trickle charge at the same time. And it provides huge improvements also while your feet are on a grounding mat and your whole body is charging and discharging and receiving other nourishment. So absolutely, there's a lot of value and merit to doing that. I don't know of anyone else that does it in that way. And that's why I say it's my approach when we're kind of having these podcasts and discussions. This is always going to be from this space and this little bubble of perspective. So I think people should keep that in mind. The other thing I think is really important to mention and to just kind of leave on this note is to really consider that the life that human beings have always lived for millennia since we have been in existence, we have always been directly connected to nature and to outdoors. And we have lived in buildings and shelters that were directly connected to the earth, not through metal, not through manufactured and synthetic materials, but through natural materials directly touching the ground or hay that's on the ground. And I'm not suggesting that we at all go back to that type of living, but what I am suggesting and hoping that people can really gather from this is that we are natural beings. We're part of nature. When we live completely disconnected from nature, we will get sick. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when and in what expression we'll see. So my goal is to help people live better, live well, live more naturally, live more connected, so that I can help reduce the amount of chronic illness, chronic issues, chronic pain, and suffering that humanity has gone through for the last 100 years. And I think that's a really important matter to really drill into people's heads. We are nature. We are part of the natural world. If we don't recognize that and we want to keep living in a superficial man-made reality, we have to recognize the effects that come with that cause, right? So I hope people want to be the effect to their own cause. Put your feet on the ground, get a grounding sheet, get a grounding mat for at home, get a grounding seat for your car, whatever it is that you can do, something simple and consistent that reconnects you to the natural source, the natural world, even if it's through a man-made way. These work. It seriously improves your inner fluid dynamics, which is everything. again, we can talk about another day. But it's just so important. And when you start to feel more connected then and more grounded, then everything kind of flows and changes from there. So I think that's the best place to leave it at today.
Such a simple but highly effective practice that can easily change so much at a very small, subtle, but very impactful way.
Profound.
Thank you today for another wonderful podcast. And next week we'll get at it again.
Awesome. Thanks, Jesse.
Om. So